don't know what this is. What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Forever Green Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo, where right now there is a piece of news behind the scenes that I have no idea about, but we're going to go check it out because everybody is blowing up my phone over this, and I'm assuming it involves the Boston Celtics. And just long story short, this is my live reaction to whatever we're about to see. So let's go to X here, formerly known as Twitter. Let's hit the refresh button. Notifications. What do we got? Oh my. Oh my God. Oh my God. Per Shams Charania. Blockbuster. The Boston Celtics have agreed to trade Jaylen Brown to the Philadelphia 76ers for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks, sources tell ESPN. Wow. That is a true sham wow. I'm actually speechless at this moment in time. Details on the 76ers picks to the Celtics per sources. 2028 first-round pick that could convert from a first to a swap that is more favorable to Boston. A 2031 unprotected Philadelphia first. A 2028 second round most favorable of Golden State, Oklahoma City, and Milwaukee, a second round pick. A 2030 second round pick most favorable of Washington, Portland, and Phoenix. Jaylen Brown on his way to the 76ers. Paul George, now a Boston Celtic. Paul George and Mike Conley, Boston Celtics on the same day. It feels like this should have happened 7 years ago. But here we are in 2026. Oh my goodness. I don't even have words for this. Jaylen Brown, a 10-year Celtics career comes to an end with Jaylen Brown being traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, who the Celtics just blew a 3-1 lead to. So the Celtics, Jaylen Brown's last moment as a Celtic is losing Game 7 to the Sixers, blowing a 3-1 lead. And then Brad Stevens and the Celtics front office, and of course, Wick Grosbeck and Bill Chisholm at the helm of ownership, sending Jaylen Brown to the Philadelphia 76ers for Paul George, 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. I am baffled. Jaylen Brown must have been disgruntled. You don't do this trade if you're the Celtics if Jaylen Brown isn't disgruntled. Jaylen Brown, $57.1 million next year. In 27-28, $61 million, and then $65 million in 28-29 for Jaylen Brown. For Paul George, $54.1 million next year in 26-27, and then he has a player option for $56.6 million in 27-28. So the Celtics getting rid of Jaylen Brown's money in 28-29. Jaylen Brown owed $65 million in 28-29. That is now cleared from the books in that year. As for the short term, Jaylen Brown making $57.1 next year. As for Paul George, $54.1. So the Celtics saving about $3 million by trading away Jaylen Brown for Paul George, at least next year. And then the year after, Paul George with a player option, $56.6 million. Jaylen Brown that year making 61. So the Celtics going to save about $5 million there, although the player option, Paul George could opt out of that and sign a long-term deal with the Celtics for a shorter dollar. I am baffled. I am absolutely baffled right now. we have to watch Jaylen Brown in a 76ers uniform next year. And what's insane about this is that Sixers series changes the fates of everybody in this situation. Paul George plays extremely well in that series and boosts his trade value with Philadelphia. And who's the taker? It's the Celtics, who move on from Jaylen Brown after he leads the team all year long to the second seed in the East without Jason Tatum for most of the year. And then, of course, the team falling apart in the last 3 games of the Sixers series, where Paul George looks great, Jaylen Brown doesn't, the Celtics don't. If that series goes the Celtics' way instead of the Sixers' way, does this trade happen? I don't think so. And my first reaction of this, obviously, is just speechless, and this is an unthinkable move. But transactionally, the Celtics are adding draft capital in the future. And not only are they doing that, they're replacing Jaylen Brown with a player in which you could say over the course of his career, when he's been in his prime, although people speculate is Paul George still in his prime or not the last 2 seasons, he's been at the same level, if not better, than Jaylen Brown. And in fact, in his career, Paul George, 2018-19, yes, 7 years ago, was a top 3 MVP candidate. And there's a reason the Sixers gave him the contract in which they did. But what I question immediately is, does this make the Sixers a force in the East? Tyrese Maxey, Jaylen Brown, VJ Edgecombe. They just signed Dean Wade. And of course, Joel Embiid, if he's healthy, the most dominant center in the league, maybe outside of Nikola Jokic, of course. That's their starting 5. Wow. That is unbelievable. I mean, Paul George, yeah, Brian Robb points out here, Paul George outplayed Jaylen Brown in the first round this year. Can't say I expected that to lead to this. I am actually speechless. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, no more. Really? Really? That is truly the end of an era. 2024 NBA champions. Right back here. I'm speechless. I seriously, really? Really? The Sixers trading for Jaylen Brown, and great, the Celtics pick up a 2028 first round pick, a 2031 first round pick, and a 2028 and 2030 second round pick as well. Second round picks, rather, along with Paul George. So Paul George older, of course. So right now, Jaylen Brown is 30 years old, which we can never get the ages right on players. We're always in the range. Jaylen Brown, 29 years old. He'll be 30 by the time the season gets underway. He'll be 30 the first week of the season. Paul George, he will be 36 next year, so he'll turn 37 after next season. So the Celtics trading a 29-year-old Jaylen Brown away for a 36-year-old Paul George. That is some risky business. The Celtics are thinking, yeah, maybe we add some draft capital on top of this. And come on. Jaylen Brown must have been disgruntled and upset because this is unthinkable. Not only do the Celtics move off Jaylen Brown, they move off Jaylen Brown for a player in which people thought in 2024-25, this is a player nobody was taking from the Philadelphia 76ers with that contract. The Celtics pick up 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. And you could say, yes, Paul George outplayed Jaylen Brown in the first round, but 36 years old, 29 years old for Jaylen Brown. I am not sure about this. I mean, right off the bat, I think Paul George, could he mesh with the Celtics better with Tatum as the top ball handler? And then you go down the list and you think Paul George, he's going to be in that second tier role with the Celtics as a ball handler, playing off Jason Tatum. And he's fine with doing that in his career because we've seen it with Russell Westbrook. We've seen it with Kawhi Leonard. We've seen it with Joel Embiid. Now he's doing it with Jason Tatum. And you could say Paul George, a little more efficient as a scorer and a ball handler and a playmaker than Jaylen Brown at times. And if he's at his highest level on the defensive end of the floor, he can be better than Jaylen Brown on that end too. Of course, that is considering Paul George at his peak, which at this moment in his career, at 36 years old, coming off a bunch of injuries, a slew of injuries the last couple of years, it's not for certain we see that Paul George with the Celtics consistently. But I see a world in which this makes sense for the Celtics. And what I'll point out too is Paul George, he's bigger than Jaylen Brown. He's just a little bit bigger. He's about 6'8", 6'9". Jaylen Brown's around a 6'6" build. And that adds a little bit of length to your team defensively for the Celtics. So there are all these rationalizations that one can come up with when looking at this trade, but oh my goodness, I don't even think it's fully set in yet how massive and monumental this move really is. And of course, it couldn't have happened at a worse time. We are about an hour and a half away from the United States and Bosnia game in the round of 32, which is a big moment. And Franco, nonetheless, is working a 12-hour work shift where he's getting off in about 4 to 5 hours from now. So we are in no man's land when it comes to filming content for this. But this is one of the most monumental moves the Celtics have made, maybe in their franchise's history. Jaylen Brown's number will be in the rafters. He has a ring with the Celtics. For Paul George, 2 firsts and 2 seconds, that definitely signals to me Jaylen Brown was not happy about the whole Giannis trade saga, particularly pertaining to the Celtics side of things. I am, wow. If you were to bet on, what's insane is the Celtics are making all these moves all of a sudden. You think this could have happened years ago. The Celtics could have traded the pick that led to Jaylen Brown in 2016 for Paul George. They could have traded that pick to the Pacers for Paul George back in 2016. They didn't. They kept that pick. It led to Jaylen Brown. Of course, came around again. The Celtics could have given up the pick that led to Jason Tatum away for Paul George as well. And now in 2026, wow. Jason Tatum and Paul George are teammates. Again, this would have been a little more highly anticipated, maybe back in 2019 or 2020, but right now, oof. What? Steve Jones, thank you. Someone's saying it right now. This Celtics offseason is an oddity, baby, because wasn't everyone saying gap year and now we're at Paul George? What in the what? Jaylen Brown to Philadelphia and Paul George to Boston? What is happening? What is happening? I can't even, part of me doesn't want to believe this. Like, am I being pranked? Like, I keep scrolling on Twitter, like, someone say this trade has been rescinded. I'm excited because for me, Paul George next to Jason Tatum, I think that's going to be some beautiful basketball. I think on both ends of the floor, the Celtics are going to truly benefit from that. But trading Jaylen Brown away to a division rival, the Philadelphia 76ers, now we have to watch Jaylen Brown in a Philadelphia 76ers jersey. This is like, there's not too many. I'm trying to think about what could compare to this. And the first thing that really comes to mind, and this doesn't even compare to the fullest of extent because he didn't spend as much time with this team, but Terrell Owens. going from Philadelphia to Dallas back in, what year was that? 2005, 2006. So that, I mean, still involves Philadelphia, but looking at that, Terrell Owens played what? 8 years with the Niners, 2 years with the Eagles, and then flocks down to Dallas in '06. So that's a little different. But I would say there's some inkling of that in this where you're thinking, whoa, that's a big name going from one rival to the next. And that's what I'm concerned about is Jaylen Brown, Joel Embiid, VJ Edgecombe, Tyrese Maxey. That is a team. That is going to be a team. Wow. That is a true ShamWow. That is a true ShamWow. Oh my goodness gracious. Are you? I'm not. And we're going to go watch this USA Bosnia game right now. And we're going to have. Oh my. How are we doing this? Sports. Throw your hands up in the air, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my goodness gracious. So I also think about this too when it comes to Jaylen Brown's market. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and Paul George. What's interesting about this is the Sixers, you'd think, I mean, man, they really rejuvenated Paul George's trade value. The reason why the Sixers were at a position, were at a spot a year ago, basically, where they needed a trade off of Paul George basically was going to look like Paul George, a first round pick, maybe a second first round pick for basically nothing. And now that same deal, essentially, Paul George and 2 first round picks, what was initially a salary dump for the Sixers now turns into Jaylen Brown. Just, I wonder if that's the right move for the Celtics. Because again, a year ago, you're thinking Paul George for 2 first round picks nets the Sixers nothing. It's a pure salary dump move. Instead, now it lands them Jaylen Brown. And congratulations to Belgium in the 125th minute against Senegal, coming back from down 2 goals, potentially winning this knockout stage game 3-2 over Senegal. Congratulations to Belgium. I'm seeing it in the background right now. Wow. So I am a little speechless on this. Jaylen Brown. I was really thinking earlier today, like the Celtics shouldn't move Jaylen Brown. They shouldn't. He's a culture setter. He's a tone setter. The example in which he is set in Boston, the standard in which he has solidified alongside everyone else in the building, goes from ownership down to the front office, to the coaching staff, to the players. Jaylen Brown has been a huge, huge pillar. One of the top 2, him and Jason Tatum. The Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown era over. I can't even really bring myself to, that's not even sinking in to me right now. But Jaylen Brown, one of the pillars of success for the Celtics over the last 10 years. This is monumental. It's unbelievable. It's all of the insane words in which one wants to bring up for something as absolutely jaw-dropping as this is. I'm looking at Jaylen Brown on draft night right now, a picture of him that Daniel Donabedian, who we had on the Celtics Talk Weekly program, of course, last year, he tweeted this photo out, and man, Jaylen Brown, he's grown up a Celtic. 10 years with the Boston Celtics. His number will be in the rafters. The culture that exists in Boston right now, Jaylen Brown has a huge hand in that. To trade that away, this is an earth-shattering move for the Celtics, the state of Massachusetts. The city of Boston, of course. I am just, I'm not. I just Justin Turpin, who we also had on the Celtics Talk Weekly program last year, tweeting out, "I can't believe that was the return. That's bad." And that's what I think from this is last year, the Celtics were in a position where they're in a gap year waiting for Tatum to come back. Brown leads the team. And now, I mean, I go back to 24-25. The Celtics are title contenders. The Sixers are the 13th seed in the East. Nobody wants Paul George. Again, if the Sixers are to trade him, it's Paul George, a first round pick, maybe another first round pick to move off Paul George for a smaller contract, if not nothing. And now the Sixers move that deal a year later after Jaylen Brown finishes top 6 in MVP voting. And the Sixers are the 7th seed in the East. They trade the Paul George deal for Jaylen Brown. That's a win if you're the Sixers. Now, the unprotected first round pick, you're going, whatever. We thought we were going to give that up to get off Paul George or Joel Embiid last year. Yet now here we are with Jaylen Brown. And the new look Celtics starting five: Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, Paul George, Jason Tatum, and Mitchell Robinson. I'm just saying, folks, that's not nothing right there. This is still a really good team. And that's what, if you're a Celtics fan, got to be excited for that. This is still a great Celtic team. They're still going to be favorites in the East, or at least top 3. And yes, it's going to feel like the world just ended with Jaylen Brown moving down to Philadelphia, but this team is still going to be very good. And Paul George, he could work. He could be a more efficient player next to Jason Tatum. I'm just pointing that out from a cutthroat perspective because, wow, people are not going to like this move. People are not liking this move. Let's just generally explore Twitter right now. What's happening on the explore page here? Jaylen Brown spent all summer calling Embiid a flopper. Now they're teammates. The Sixers were able to keep the Clippers first that they own. Unreal, says Kevin O'Connor. I mean, sometimes I look at that and I go, okay, well, which picks do you really want? Guess the market for Jaylen wasn't that great, says Ryan Russillo. I mean, I guess it wasn't because you trade him for comparable value a little bit, but moving up in age significantly. You net 2 first-round picks. You're saying, if you're the Celtics, we think Paul George could make our team better in the short term for us to potentially compete for a title the next couple of years. And we're adding draft capital on top of that. And by the time Paul George's window's over, well, that draft capital is going to come to fruition. And you hope the Celtics have maybe won a title by that point, or you're signing Paul George. I think this is the big thing to understand within this deal, actually, is the contracts here, which, if I could get myself to somehow on the LaMelo Ball page right now, I'm like, all right, we are. So the Celtics, what I think is important to understand about this deal, so Paul George has a $56.6 million player option in 27-28. What I think the Celtics are predicting in this situation would be Paul George is on the roster next year for $54.1 million. That's just going to happen as is. But then the year after that, Paul George, we think maybe as the Boston Celtics, Paul George will opt out of his player option. And if all goes well in 26-27, we'll have another long-term deal on the table for Paul George at a lesser number that will potentially cut the salary number in 27-28 down by maybe $20-25 million, depending on what Paul George actually costs in that season, if he does in fact opt out. Say Paul George opts out of his $56.6 million player option and signs a $30 million deal, similar to, what the rumors have been for Harden and LeBron as veterans, right? You think about this deal for Paul George relative to Jaylen Brown. So in 27-28, Paul George could be making $30 million, which Jaylen Brown, on the other hand, if you go back and look at Jaylen Brown's contract, in the same season, he is making $61 million. So the Celtics could be saving $31 million in the 27-28 season. And what's important about this is the Celtics, it seems as if they're going to dip the luxury tax in 26-27, which is going to reset the repeater tax for 27, 28, and 29. The Celtics are going to go full throttle on spending in 27, 28, and 29. So the Celtics essentially will be opening up their window to spending along with now you've cut $31 million off of Jaylen Brown's salary, and now you're allocating that to Paul George. And this is a little theoretical here, saying Paul George will likely opt out of his player option. Maybe he signs a 3-year, $90 million deal with the Celtics, or a 2-year, $60 million deal with the Celtics. Say he's making $30 million in 27, 28. But in 27, 28, and 29, so 27, 28, 28, 29, and 29, 30, basically, which, yes, so actually reboot this 28, 29, and 30. That's really the 3-year window in terms of the championships you could win. But 28, 29, and 30, the Celtics will open their windows those years to spend beyond the luxury tax line into the aprons. And you're looking at this instead of Tatum, Brown, White, and the rest, whoever you want to put on the roster at that point in time in 2 years. But say the pillars here, Tatum, Brown, and White, instead of Tatum, Brown, and White in 27, 28, the Celtics could be riding with Tatum, Paul George, White, and another $30 million player. So, or a $20 million player, or a $20 million player, and a $10 million player. So that's why the Celtics did this deal from a financial perspective. Is you're looking at the window specifically in 27, 28, 28, 29, and 29, 30. Those seasons, the Celtics now own the ability to add extra guys to the roster while potentially putting Paul George's salary at a lesser number from what Jaylen Brown's salary was. And you might receive more efficient production out of Paul George during those years. So that is part of this deal that people need to understand, and it goes beyond the legacy of Jaylen Brown in Boston. But I see the roadmap as to why the Celtics would do this deal from a financial perspective and on court, just considering the versatility that Paul George brings as a bigger forward. Yes, he's older, maybe less athletic at this point in his career than Jaylen Brown, but he's owned a better reputation as a defender than Jaylen Brown throughout his career. And then offensively, he's meshed next to other superstars in his career: Russell Westbrook, Kawhi Leonard, Joel Embiid. He could do the same with Jason Tatum. He's okay being a number 2, and he might be an efficient number 2 as an off-ball shooter, somebody, of course, who can handle the ball and play make for the squad. In that regard, I mean, you just look at what Paul George's ability is on the court as a basketball player. Reputation-wise, throughout his career, he's been a more well-rounded player than Jaylen Brown. And he's even reached higher peaks, top 3 in MVP voting versus Jaylen Brown, top 6, just to throw that out there. I'm just throwing that out there. But not that it really means anything, of course, at this point in time. But there is some rationale in this for the Celtics. Yes, Paul George is 36. Jaylen Brown is going to be 30 next season, essentially. That is a huge risk for the Celtics, but you're thinking in this window, 27, 28, 28, 29, and 29, 30. So 28, 29, and 30 in terms of the titles. The Celtics really going to go after those 3, in which that's not the end of Jason Tatum's Celtics career, but Tatum's deal, his deal expires basically as a player option in 29-30 for $71.5 million. And then there's no money on the books for 2030, 2031. And by that time, Jason Tatum will be, what? So this was 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. So Tatum will be around 31, 32. So even you're looking at the future there too, where you're thinking Tatum by that time will still only be around 31, 32 years old. When all this money comes off the books, if you still have Jason Tatum, you can still build a roster around him later on in time with different players that are not Jaylen Brown and Derek White and Paul George and all the players in which we're talking about right now. This team could look entirely different in 4 to 5 years. But the Celtics, As long as you have Jason Tatum, you're pretty good here. Yes, you traded Jaylen Brown for Paul George, but what was discussed a lot is Jaylen Brown's contract was going to hamper the Celtics from building in the future. And that's why the Celtics made this move is they realized, okay, we could either have Tatum, Brown, and White, or we could have Tatum, Paul George, White, and another player. That's just what it is at the end of the day. And they're saying, okay, well, Paul George is comparable to Jaylen Brown and even outplayed Jaylen Brown in a first round series in 2026 as a more well rounded player, even at 36 years old. Maybe he actually gives us more efficient production for what he is than what Jaylen Brown is, even as a 29-year-old at this point in his career. But scrolling Twitter here, we got Caveman in a Sixers uniform. We got GRD in a Sixers shirt out here. What is going on? They're not actually in a Sixers. Somebody photoshopped them out here. It's in the Jaylen Brown live stream with the Jaylen Brown is wearing a Sixers uniform as well. Some of these are just harsh. We got a lot of gun pointing and jumping off buildings, and oh my goodness. Tatum in a Blues jersey right now. It's truly the end of an era in Boston, says Tomek. Wow. This East offseason is crazy. Yes, thanks, Josh Hart. Thanks for this, because without you guys in 25 doing exactly what you did to the Celtics, we probably wouldn't be here. Oh, geez. Mike Conley. So, fun fact, the Celtics' new point guard, Mike Conley, is older than his head coach, Joe Mazzulla. Of course, the Celtics adding Mike Conley and Mitchell Robinson earlier today. The Celtics really wanted Mike Conley back in 2019. The Celtics really wanted Paul George back in 2016, 2017. Now it's 2026, they're just coming around all these names finally. Jeff Goodman. In Brad, I trusted, ... until now. So, I think this is going to be a future move that people will eventually understand. At Sam LaFrance says, he posts a quote of AJ DeBonsa before the draft. This is my last year being a Celtics fan. Mitchell Robinson with a flag here. Okay. We'll just like that. We're going to send it, but apparently we can't send tweets on here. Wow. I mean, I guess that's going to do it for me in terms of I'm actually worried for Bill Simmons' safety, says Basketball University. Adam Kaufman says Paul George has only played 60-plus games in a season once since 2019. He has been an all-star 3 times in that span with the Clippers and Sixers. Okay. Well, that's fine. Brad actually needs to be fed to the Lions for this BS, says Samaje. Adam Kaufman points out this is quite possibly a 1-year rental for the Celtics. Wow. Walker Kessler goes for 2 firsts and 2 swaps this morning. Jaylen Brown, a literal MVP candidate in his prime, goes for 2 firsts and 2 seconds without a single young player coming back. Somebody please make it make sense, says Gordo at Boss Sports Gordo. So yeah, I mean, that's also a factor in this. No young players coming back for Jaylen Brown. Like, hey, you're not going to give us Phylon? You don't think Brad Stevens asked for Phylon in this situation? Edgecomb? We want Edgecomb. Did Brad say that ever? Didn't even get the Clippers first. That is what people are saying here. So, oh, Lord. So the Sixers just Sixers future draft picks here. So the Sixers have the Clippers pick in home. Oh my goodness. So the Celtics, this is what people are talking about on Twitter right now. So in 2028, the Sixers have the Clippers pick unprotected. So right now in Philadelphia's possession, a 2028 first round pick from the Clippers, no protections, a 2029 first round pick swap from the Clippers, and this is protected 1 to 3, blah, blah, blah. So, wow, the Sixers have 2 Clippers picks in 28 and 29, and the Celtics don't get either of those for Jaylen Brown, which to me in 28, you're thinking the Clippers are not going to be very good in 28 and 29. Because right now it looks like they're resetting in the West. Everyone's getting better. The Clippers are getting worse. But beyond that, so the picks in which the Celtics actually received here, the Celtics went from Giannis to a 36-year-old Paul George. Oh, oh boy. But at least they received picks for it and didn't give up picks. The Memphis Grizzlies are trading Santi Aldama to the Dallas Mavericks for A.J. Johnson, a protected 2030 Warriors first-round pick, and 2 future second-round picks. Sources tell ESPN. That is, of course, per Shams Charania. That trade coming out. So Santi Aldama is becoming a long-time Grizzly, now on his way to Dallas. That's a good ad for Dallas there. A.J. Johnson and protected pick. And, that 2030 Warriors pick, just saying, could be something. But I'm trying to... Okay, let's find the... Let's find the Shams going on SportsCenter, yada, yada. Wow, this is just monumental. So 2028 first round. So Philadelphia in this move here, let's just find where we were at. So the Sixers gave up a 2031 first round pick, which was their own. And what else? A 2028 first round pick in which, trying to follow this exactly here, a pick that could convert from a first to a swap that is more favorable to Boston. I don't really understand how that's working, but basically a 2028 first that could convert. So I don't know what pick that is, though, because the Sixers in 2028 only have the Clippers first round pick. So I'm actually assuming that the Celtics did receive the Clippers first round pick in this. All right, so we have an update on the pick situation here. So the internet needs to chill out on the Celtics didn't receive any of the Clippers first round picks. So I was clarifying this before we ran into a technical difficulty there. But it seems as if the Celtics actually did receive a Clippers pick in this situation because it's not a Philadelphia pick in 2028, although at Yossi Goslin reports here, the Celtics get the more favorable of the Clippers and Sixers first round pick in 2028 and the Sixers first round pick in 2031. And right now, 2031, none of the stars on the Sixers, none of them are under contract for 2031, although that's really saying Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid because Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe, you would assume, receive extensions that would net them 2031 salaries. So, again, Goslin says it isn't a haul of 4 first-round picks, but they got 2 potentially very valuable ones to reset the table with. Definitely, because the more favorable of the Clippers and Sixers first-round pick in 2028, what's interesting about that is I don't see on here the Sixers first-round pick. I don't know where that is actually moving off to in this situation. So let's see. The Clippers... Trying to figure out future incoming. Oh, okay, so 2028 first round draft pick to Brooklyn. 20. So the Clippers, my bad. The Sixers first round pick in 2028 is actually going to Brooklyn, but it's protected 1 through 8. But the Celtics somehow received the more favorable between the Clippers and the Sixers pick for that year, but the Sixers are sending that to Brooklyn. So I'm not really sure how that's working, but regardless, the Celtics do have their hands on this Clippers pick for 2028. So here's Keith Smith trying to actually clarify this here. The 2028 pick Boston is getting or swapping with the Sixers is kind of complicated. Boston could get Philadelphia's pick if it lands 1 through 8. If that pick is 9 through 30, it's gone from the Sixers in a complicated swap that involves multiple teams. If the Philadelphia pick is 9 through 30, then Boston could get the most favorable of their own pick and the LA Clippers pick that Philadelphia owns, with the less favorable pick staying with the Sixers. I think that's how it will work out. More to come when it's all been sorted out. And that's what I was thinking too, is somehow if the Sixers maintain their pick or retain their pick, if it lands 1 through 8, then it somehow flips over to Boston in a potential swap between the most favorable of the Sixers and the Clippers. I understand this. I get it. What I just read from Keith Smith, he breaks it down really well, but it is a little complicated to understand. But regardless, the Celtics in 2028, that might be a really valuable first round pick. It's either a Clippers pick, a Sixers pick, either one of those picks. If it's a Sixers pick, it'll be 1 through 8. If it's a Clippers pick, who knows where that could be? That could be a top 5 pick. That could be a top 10 pick. Who knows where that's going to be with the new draft rules, especially enacted for that specific season as well. But whew, it's not all doom and gloom. Yes, Jaylen Brown is a 76er, but it's not all doom and gloom for Celtic Nation here. But we do have to hop off because the United States and Bosnia, about an hour away. Jaylen Brown, a Philadelphia 76er, Paul George, a Boston Celtic. I was speechless, but then I just talked for 45 minutes. So how speechless really was I in that moment? I just I've wow, the Celtics actually moved Jaylen Brown. The Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum era is now over. I'm gonna have to let that sink in. I'm gonna have to sleep on that one. I might have to shed a tear. That is not a joke. That is not a joke. I might actually have to shed a tear at a time off camera, alone in a dark room, away from society. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, 2024 NBA champions. My goodness. But that is going to do it for me here today, folks. Of course, I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and don't forget to like, subscribe, comment to the Forever Green Sports social medias, YouTube, Instagram. Go check us out, of course, at Seamus Zarlingo and at Nick Franco Media. But that's going to do it for me here today, folks. Of course, as I always say, thank you all for watching. And I know at the end of this, we always say, we don't actually have something to say right now at the end of this in terms of our sign off. But what we used to say when we were working with Celtics Talk Weekly, it's always been the same. Go Celtics. Go Celtics.